Welcome to a deep dive into ecology. We're going to be using excerpts that you provided from a biology textbook, focusing on the chapters about organisms, populations, and their interactions.
So fascinating.
We'll uncover how populations grow and change, explore relationships between different species, competition, symbiosis, the whole deal, and even learn about a pioneering Indian ecologist.
Those chapters cover a lot of ground, from individual organisms to whole ecosystems.
Right. The textbook starts by explaining those different levels of organization.
It's like zooming in and out with a camera, starting with the individual organism, then populations, which are groups of individuals from the same species in an area. Zoom out more, you get communities, those are groups of interacting species, and then finally biomes, which are basically large ecosystems with their own climates and communities.
I thought it was interesting how the book mentioned that populations have characteristics that individuals don't have.
Oh, for sure. For instance, an individual doesn't have a birth or death rate, but populations do. And those rates, along with things like sex ratios and how old the individuals are, those are critical for understanding how populations change over time.
I noticed they talked about age pyramids. I think there was even a diagram showing different shapes depending on if a population was growing or shrinking.
Age pyramids are a great way to visualize a population's future. A pyramid with a wide base, that means there are a lot of young individuals. It suggests the population is going to grow quickly. It has big implications when you're thinking about things like how many resources you need, especially for us, human populations.
Definitely. Speaking of growth, I need a little refresher on this term they used, intrinsic rate of natural increase. I think they used the letter R for it.
Right. R basically shows how fast a population could grow if there were unlimited resources, like its potential for population explosion.
Okay, so a bigger R value means a population could grow really fast.
Exactly. But we know that in real life, there's not always enough food or space or whatever. So that's where carrying capacity comes in. The textbook called it K, so the maximum number of individuals an environment can support. And K isn't set in stone either. It can change depending on the environment or if new species come into the picture.
Right. So even if a population takes off growing like crazy, eventually resources become limited and things level out, right?
That's the idea behind logistic growth, that S-shaped curve they showed.
Then there's all the different ways species reproduce. Salmon only spawn once, then die, but elephants have only a few babies but take really good care of them.
There's so much variety. It all comes down to maximizing what they call reproductive fitness. Basically making sure your genes make it to the next generation.
The textbook made it clear that no species is an island.
That's right. The different types of species interactions like competition, predation, parasitism, commensalism, mutualism, even amensalism, they're all important.
Using the plus and minus system was a good way to explain it, I thought. Predation plus for the predator, minus for the prey.
Simple, right? Makes it easier to see who benefits and who doesn't.
So we've got that classic example of the tiger eating the deer, but then they said that even a sparrow eating a seed is a predator.
Because it is. It just goes to show that predation happens everywhere with all different sizes of creatures.
And they all play a role, right? Like that example about the prickly pear cactus that was taking over Australia.
Oh, yeah. They finally got it under control by bringing in a moth that eats it.
Shows how we can use ecological knowledge to fix things in the real world.
Absolutely.
Okay, now competition is that battle for resources, right? The example with the Abingdon tortoise and those goats was pretty sad.
Very sad. It shows how bringing in species that don't belong can really mess things up.
Yeah.
The goats were much better at eating all the plants, and the tortoises basically starved.
It definitely makes you think about the unintended consequences we can have on the ecosystem.
But competition isn't always one species winning and the other losing completely. Sometimes it makes species adapt and use resources differently so they can both exist. The book called it competitive release.
Like when they remove that one type of barnacle and the other one spread out more?
That's the one. Competition can even lead to totally new species over time.
Makes sense. Now, parasitism always gives me the creep.
It's a wild one for sure. It's basically when one organism lives in or on another, the host, and gets its nutrients from it.
And the host suffers, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, like they could steal nutrients or weaken the host's immune system.
They mentioned brood parasitism, cuckoos, and cowbirds. Those birds that lay their eggs in other birds' nests?
Yeah, the cuckoo chicks hatch first and kick the other eggs out.
Talk about manipulation.
Right. And then you've got commensalism. One benefits, the other isn't helped or hurt. I always think about the remora fish riding on sharks.
They get a free ride and free food.
Right. And then there's mutualism. Everybody wins. Like the clownfish and the sea anemones.
The clownfish gets a safe place to live. The anemone gets protection. Perfect partnership.
And don't forget about the oxpecker birds and zebras.
The birds eat the ticks and bugs off the zebra.
Shows how interconnected everything is.
Before we move on, I wanted to mention that part about Ramdeo Misra. They called him the father of ecology in India.
He did a lot of research on tropical ecosystems, especially in India.
He was a big deal in ecology, both for his research and for teaching.
Shows how important it is to study ecology everywhere in the world.
Well, I think we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We've gone through the basics of ecology, from how life is organized to how populations change over time and how different species interact.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we got the basics right, different levels of organization, how populations grow, and all those cool interactions between species.
Yeah, from the tortoises and goats to the cuckoos, it's amazing how everything is connected.
It really is. Today, let's focus on population attributes. These help us figure out how a population works as a whole, not just individual organisms.
The textbook mentioned birth and death rates, which makes sense. They'll determine if a population is growing or not. What else should we consider?
Well, population density is a big one. Basically, how many individuals there are in a given space.
Okay, so like a crowded city would have a high population density.
Exactly. If there are tons of individuals packed together, resources might be scarce, which can affect everything from survival to reproduction.
So it's not always just about how many there are, right? The textbook mentioned something about biomass.
Yeah, biomass looks at the total mass of all living things in a certain area.
So a giant redwood tree would have a way bigger impact than a field of grass, even if there are fewer trees.
Exactly. It's not just about the number of individuals, but the role they play in the ecosystem.
Makes sense. So besides births and deaths and how dense a population is, what else influences how it changes over time?
Don't forget about movement. Immigration, which is when individuals move into a population, and emigration, which is when they leave. Those can really shake things up, especially for small or isolated populations.
So it's this constant flow, right? Individuals going in and out all the time. Reminds me of those population growth models we talked about.
You're right. Those models help us figure out the different ways populations change. Exponential growth, that's the J-shaped curve, happens when there are tons of resources and the population just explodes.
But like we said before, usually there's a limit to those resources, right? That's when logistic growth comes in.
Exactly. Logistic growth factors and carrying capacity, the maximum number of individuals an environment can handle. It's like a ceiling for how much a population can grow.
Even if a population starts growing like crazy, at some point those limited resources will slow things down and it will level off.
Right. And remember, carrying capacity isn't a fixed number. Drought, temperature changes, even a new species coming in can change it.
Like with those tortoises and goats.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Speaking of visualizing things, one of the most useful tools is the age pyramid. It's amazing how much information you can get just from looking at it.
They said the shape of the pyramid can tell you if a population is growing, stable, or shrinking.
That's right. A pyramid with a really wide base means there are a ton of young individuals, which means it's a fast-growing population. That's useful for planning for the future, like how many resources we'll need.
But a narrower base would mean slower growth or even a decline.
Right. Age pyramids are like windows into the past and future of a population.
Now, all of this is connected to how species interact, right?
Exactly. The book did a great job showing all the different interactions and how they affect populations, like predation, which is where one species benefits by eating another.
Like the tiger and the deer.
Right, but also think of a bird eating a seed. They're both predators.
True. I like that example about the starfish and the mussels.
Oh, yeah. What happened when they removed the starfish?
Well, the mussels, since they weren't getting eaten as much, probably went nuts, right?
Yeah, exactly. The mussels took over, and it actually reduced how many different species lived there. The starfish were important for keeping things balanced.
So even small changes can have big consequences.
That's why it's so important to understand how everything is connected in an ecosystem.
Now, competition, we already talked about the Abingdon tortoise, but it's not always that dramatic, is it?
Not always. Sometimes it can make species adapt and share resources so they can coexist, like Darwin's finches.
Their beaks are all different shapes because they adapted to eat different kinds of seeds.
Right. They found their own niches because of competition.
Competition can actually be beneficial in the long run. Now, what about parasitism? We mentioned those cuckoos.
Those are sneaky birds. But remember, parasitism takes lots of forms. Some live inside their hosts, some live on the outside, but they all have amazing adaptations to get what they need from the host.
It's fascinating and gross at the same time, like a tapeworm.
Right, but it shows how life finds a way. Like that human liver fluke, it needs a snail and a fish to complete its life cycle.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. Shows how everything is connected, even in the weird world of parasites.
Now, mutualism is a lot more pleasant to think about.
Absolutely. Remember the mycorrhizal fungi and plants.
Yeah. The fungi help the plants absorb water and nutrients, and the plants give the fungi sugars.
Perfect partnership. They rely on each other.
A perfect example of a win-win situation. And there are so many examples of plants and their pollinators.
Right, from orchids tricking insects to flowers providing nectar. Those relationships have shaped evolution, and it's why we have so many different flowers and pollinators today.
It's amazing how it all works together.
It is.
We've covered a lot, from population density to how different species interact.
And it all comes back to that idea that everything is connected in nature.
Absolutely. We're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've gone from the basics of how life is organized to populations and those incredible interactions between species.
It's amazing how much depth there is to this topic.
And the one thing that really stands out to me is how no species truly exists on its own. It's like this giant complex web.
That's a perfect way to put it. Today, I thought we could look closer at some of those specific examples of species interactions from the textbook.
Great idea. Let's start with the classic predation. The textbook showed a tiger hunting a deer.
The classic image, right. That's the perfect illustration of how energy flows through an ecosystem. The tiger gets its energy from the deer gets its energy from plants.
That's the chain reaction.
Right. But we shouldn't forget about all the smaller acts of predation happening too. It's not just the big predators.
The textbook said that even a sparrow eating a seed is a type of predator.
That's right. Predation happens at every level, and it's critical for keeping things balanced. Predators help control prey populations, which is important so they don't overgraze or become too numerous.
Like that example with the starfish and mussels.
What happened when they removed the starfish?
The mussels must have taken over, right?
Yep, they did, and it actually made the ecosystem less diverse overall. The starfish, by eating the mussels, were helping to keep things in check.
It's incredible how just changing one thing can throw everything off.
Exactly. Every species has a role to play.
Okay, now competition. We talked about the Abingdon tortoise.
Sad story. But remember, competition isn't always a fight to the death. Sometimes it forces species to change how they use resources so they can coexist.
Like Darwin's finches, their beaks adapted to different types of food.
Exactly. Competition led to diversification, and that makes ecosystems richer and more resilient in the long run.
Now, back to parasitism for a second. We already talked about the birds that lay their eggs in other birds' nests.
Brood parasitism. Pretty sneaky. But remember, that's just one type.
Some live inside their hosts, some live on the outside. But they've all got those amazing ways to take advantage of the host.
Millions of years of evolution. Like, did you read about the human liver fluke? It needs a snail and a fish to complete its life cycle.
I did. It's like a whole mini ecosystem within a bigger one.
It's incredible.
Now onto mutualism. So many cool examples of win-win relationships.
Mutualism shows how cooperation can work in nature, like with the mycorrhizal fungi in plants.
The fungi help the plants take up water and nutrients.
And the plants give the fungi sugars in return. They both need each other.
Like a perfect trading system.
And then, of course, you have all the different plants and pollinators.
The textbook talked about orchids that trick insects, but there are so many others that offer nectar or pollen as a reward.
It's a partnership that's shaped evolution.
Before we wrap things up, I wanted to circle back to Ramdeo Misra.
A true pioneer in the field.
His work is a good reminder that ecological principles work the same everywhere, but the challenges and opportunities can be different in different places. He really helped us understand tropical ecosystems.
And he was dedicated to teaching and mentoring, which is super important for training future generations of ecologists.
Well, I think we've really explored the world of ecology, from the basic principles to those fascinating interactions between species.
We've learned about populations, adaptations, even a little bit about the history of ecology.
I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive. We've seen how interconnected everything is. It's a constant reminder to appreciate the complexity and beauty of nature.